Numerous episodes about the founding of the Mongol Empire, its early successes, its armies and other topics have been produced. However, no empire endures the ebbs and flows of history and time. There is no exception for the Mongol Empire. We take you through a documentary today, through the fall of both its successor Khanates and the unified Mongol Empire. The majority of common discussions do a poor job of depicting the collapse of the Mongol Empire. The claim that it collapsed after Genghis Khan's passing is frequently untrue. The Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, the Chagatai Khanate and the Yuan dynasty, united under one banner in 1227, came out of its ruin. This, however, is demonstrably false. Genghis Khan died, and for an additional 33 years the Mongol Empire remained intact. The Genghis successors remained extraordinarily committed to growing the empire and remained not only surprisingly united. His son and successor Gedai Khan promoted the notion of Mongol global dominance. Conquests were no longer carried out based on detailed justification, but rather just for the sake of conquest. Even continuing to be an independent power was a form of rebellion against the Mongol rule, because it had been determined by heaven that everyone must submit to Genghis' rule during Ogodai's rule. North China was fully conquered by Mongol forces, who also largely took control of Iran and the Caucasus, and swept through the western steppes in 1241 before crossing into Hungary and Poland. It appeared on Gedai and his advisors took the initiative to establish a proper administrative framework for the Mongol Empire. Rather than putting the populace under conquest at the whim of the Mongolian princes, with the aid of his advisors, Gedai oversaw the construction of branch secretariats all across the nation, which, in essence, split the empire into three substantial provinces. Each secretariat's governments, which were subordinate to the central government, were in charge of regular taxation, civilian governance, and post-conquest reconstruction. The head of the Karakorum-based secretariat, whose chief also served as the empire's prime minister. These secretariats frequently competed with the Mongol princes, who believed that the empire's lands existed only for the Chingizids to exploit, and acted as the barriers to the secretariat's objectives of population protection and restoration. Between the 2-year regency of Gedai's successor Guyuk and the reigns of the imperial widows, this caused the Mongols' dream of conquest to temporarily stagnate at the 1240s, but in 1251, Mung, a grandson of Genghis, took control and became the Great Khan. It eliminated a large number of potential rivals for power. The unpredictability of the 1240s infuriated Mungi, and began a fresh campaign to strengthen the central government and renew the conquest on a global scale. He had to use the resources of the entire empire to accomplish this, and implemented a significant census that covered all of Asia through a strengthened secretariat. The outcome was under Mungi and his brother Kublai. Titanic armies were in action in China at the same time, while another powerful force led by his brother Hulagu advanced west to subdue the final Islamic states that still enjoyed independence, for a ground observer at the conclusion. There was no reason to question Mongolia's success in the end of the 1250s. Government agencies have so far proven to be strong for them, and a strong push seemed set to bring in even more of them, of the planet under their rule. All would soon be under the Grand Khan's control. Nonetheless, Mungis in Sichuan province, the Song dynasty campaign against it was slowed down by sieges, mud and rain. Among Mung's soldiers, disease, possibly cholera, from contaminated water was rife. Mungi also gave it to it in the summer of 1259. Once again, the succession was a problem. Although it appears that none of Mungi's sons were even considered candidates, there is a small Arik Buki, Mungi's youngest full brother, was the nearest thing he had to an heir. Arik Buki, Mungi's son, was left in charge of running the government while his father was away in Karakorum, the imperial capital. The central secretariat in Karakorum swiftly supported Arik Buki in his absence. Also, Mungi's sons did, considering that selecting candidates had previously taken years. It's possible that Mungi had instructed Arik to take the role of Great Khan or regent. In the event of Mungi's passing, to make sure that transition is smooth, soon after discovering Mungis after he passed away, Arik stated to set up a curial till to elect himself Khan of Khan. Kubilai, Arik's oldest living sibling, was not happy about this. Kubilai and Mongi had a bad relationship and disagreed with the North China Secretariat. His claims that more freedom and possibly even independence had led to Mongi Khan removing Kubilai from the throne after seizing his authority and killing many of his officials. On the eve of Mongi's last campaign against the Song dynasty, the proverbial doghouse, while the rest of the army withdrew after Mongi's death in 1259 to transport the Khan's body back to Kubilai, continued his political campaign in Mongolia. Kubilai observed an opening in the door to power. He needed more military triumphs, though, in order to increase his chances of winning. It may have been impossible to ignore the feeling of having been forced out of the office by Mongi. Kubilai is an uncomfortable choice for more traditional Mongols due to his own interest in Chinese culture. He undoubtedly believed that impressive victories over the Song dynasty would elevate his status. Kubilai fought, anticipating that it would be some time before the next Kuriltai, the Song, until his wife Chabi sent him a message in November 1259. It educated Kubilai, announced his plans for an election for the summer of 1260 to his younger brother Arik Bukit, and anticipated Kubilai's backing. Kubilai reluctantly gave up his fight against the Song, however, did not go back to Mongolia. Instead, Kubilai arrived in Kaiping in the first few days of 1216. In the present day, Inner Mongolia, more popularly known as Shangdu or Xanadu under later names. Kubilai had built it to look like a Chinese city and the sort of capital it had in the past. Kubilai had caused issues from Mongi and his ministers. Here was where Kubilai was named the Great Khan of the Mongol Empire in the spring of 1260. While pro-Kubilai biographers like Rasht Alden and Marco Polo portrayed even though Arik appears to be rebelling against Kubilai, it seems that he has actually effectively usurped power. His election was definitely unlawful by Mongolian standards because it lacked representation from the other and was not carried out in Genghis' native Karakorum along the Kherlen and Onon rivers. Instead, it was held in the Chinese-inspired city of Kubilai, close to China and surrounded by signs of Chinese rule, such as Kubilai's giving. He gave himself a name that was once popular in China. After that, Arik Bukit conducted a more conventional election, a July 1260 event. The Mongol Empire had two proclaimed Great Khans for the first time. The two brothers were at war by the end of the year after a summer of bluster and back and forth. Even though Kubilai would triumph, the Tolute civil war had far-reaching effects. When Arik submitted, Kubilai invited the other family heads to join him. They decided what will happen to Arik and affirms Kubilai's victory, but none showed. The Mongol Empire had changed over the course of the 4-year conflict in the empire's far west. Burki, the leader of Jochi's line, had engaged in combat with Kubilai's other surviving brother, Hulagu. Although Burki was Muslim, his rage over Hulagu's seizure of Baghdad, Hulagu's occupation of the Caucasus infuriated Burki. Anatolia and northern Iran. Burki believed that the Jochid family owned these territories. Hulagu seized control of these lands and assassinated Burki's representatives after learning of Mongi's passing and the conflict between his brothers. Despite the lands, the Great Khan would have mediated in this manner under normal circumstances. Such occurrences are not new, but because Kubilai and Arik are at war between Burkis and Hulagu, there was no one to step in and mediate, so in 1262 they engaged in battle. Alongside the Tolute civil war, as soon as Kubilai defeated Arik, the Western Khanates were in fact sovereign states. The Mongol Empire was permanently dismantled, but not into the 4 Khanates that are well known. From the early 1300s to 1260, the sons and grandsons of the various Khans actually ruled closer to 6 Khanates. Genghis Khan, the Golden Horde, in the 1310s consisted of 2 separate Khanates ruled by both the White Horde, or Ulus of Batu, and the Blue Horde, or Ulus of Orda, are descended from Yoki. Additionally, a Gedate Khanate ruled the Chagatai Khanate, which belonged to Chagatai's descendants. Until the passing in 1301, Kaidu, Gedai's grandson, was in charge of both his own Ulus and the Chagataites. Kubilai's lineage ruled in China during the Yuan dynasty, and Hulagu's lineage controlled the majority of the Middle East during the Ilkhanate, just a few as a result of the Gedai Khanate's dissolution and the Blue Mountain conquest in the early 1300s. Do we eventually have to renounce 4 Khanates? The most notable Khanates The Ilkhanate, the Chagatai Khanate, the Yuan dynasty and the Golden Horde now form the focus of our examination of the continued history and demise. The Ilkhanate, which was founded in the 1260s by Hulagu, the sacker of Baghdad, is arguably one of the best. With a large body of surviving primary source material, we can understand the Mongol Khanates. The epic Jimmy, which was written by the Ilkhanate vizier Rashed al-Din, is the best chronicle. One of the most significant sources of the Mongol Empire is the Book of Al-Tarik, which is also known as the most significant source on the Mongol Empire, but also of the early 14th century history of the Ilkhanate. Rashed al-Din generally depicted the early Ilkhanate as an unstable time with guns, allowed greedy tyrants to rule because they were more interested in hunting, feasting and drinking than in exercising power. Viziers and military leaders should be allowed to rule. Conflict over succession broke up this. Affected by a Noyad to grow stronger, the non-Chingizis were the ancestors of the Noyad. They were generals who fought alongside Hulagu and were given lands and subjects to live off of. Khans, who were more considerate of their privileges, piqued their interest. This went along with famines, economic difficulties brought on by severe corruption and stupid policies, including an unsuccessful attempt to start using paper money and to start expensive recurring wars with the neighbors of the Ilkhanate. When Ghazan became the second Khan in 1295, Rashed al period and unrest came to an end. Rashed probably embellishes the early instability in order to extol his patron Ghazan. There appears to be substantial backing for refocusing the Ilkhanate in addition to them most obvious, which was Ghazan's decision to convert to Islam and his attempt to link it to legitimacy of the Ilkhanate. Ghazan was in charge of reviving the economy. A significant amount of work was done to reduce abuses of the population and agricultural base of the empire, reducing the number of employees, clerks, and they made excessive demands of the populace in an effort to support themselves. And they also used highway patrols to put an end to banditry. Alongside these, there were monetary reforms, and instead of Mongolian inscriptions, the new silver coin features the Shahada and Ghazan's name of Islam Padishah. Weights and measurements were uniform through the Ilkhanate. Based on those in Tabriz to promote regional trade, the underground waterways and canals were constructed to supply water for irrigation and cities. He also prohibited the use of appealing to young women to become prostitutes. Since he must have had some success. Major new construction initiatives in Tabriz, such as magnificent tomb for himself, were supported by him. He signed a peace treaty with Toghta Khan of the Golden Horde along the Ilkhanate's borders. The only notable victory of the Mongol-Mamluk war was achieved by the Mongols when they invaded the Mamluk Sultanate close to Oms, but ultimately withdrew before summer arrived. Like all good Mongol princes, Ghazan passed away in his early 30s in 1304. Throughout his rule, yet he was successful in eliminating a large number of potential heirs to be, but he had no offspring. His sibling, in light of this, Ilyetsu, succeeded him and continued many of Ghazan's policies. However, he vacillated between various religions while failing to defeat the Mamluks. But in the Great Mongol Peace of 1304, he, like other Khanates, acknowledged the Great Khan's rule. The Pax Mongolica was thus finally, if momentarily, established. The fact that he had a son to take his place was Ilyetsu's greatest accomplishment in comparison to his brother. When Ilyetsu passed away in 1316 at the age of 36, his 12-year-old son Absad was installed as king under the direction of the ruthless Noyan Choban regent. Absad's fate was unwavering. He was the first Ilkhan to be raised as a Sunni Muslim and to die as one, in contrast to his father and brother. Choban, as the great Ilkhanate scholar described it, never expressed any interest in Shiism. Charles Melville considered himself to be an exceptional member of the Chingiz dynasty, a strong person who adhered to the Khans while also upholding Sharia law. Choban was thus safeguarded. He took the young Absad and saw to it that he received a proper Islamic education, instructing him in reading, writing and other skills, and imparted to him knowledge of the house's history and genealogy, as well as Persian and Arabic. The Nojat, Absad and Chinggis Khan shared a love of poetry and music throughout his life, and traded poems with Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad after a peace agreement with the Mamluks was reached. Early on in his rule, Absad II Khan experienced frequent upheaval. Choban Nojan is in charge. Invasion attempts by the Chagatai and Golden Horde, as well as internal uprisings, were repelled by the two. The young Absad bravely entered battle, earning the nickname Ba'atar for himself. Despite their good cooperation and success in bringing about peace with the Mamluks, Absad's desire for Choban's daughter, the stunning Baghdad Khatun, led to Abdad's downfall, killing nearly every member of Choban's family, including the legendary Noyan. Following Choban's demise, the generation after Absad's rule ended, regarded as a golden period. Ibn Battuta, as well-known traveler, visited the Ikana during this time, stating that Absad was the most attractive of God's creation and was still a young man without a beard. But despite his best effort, the Khan was unable to have children. Absad eyes straight when it became apparent that Baghdad Khatun would not become pregnant. Hitting Dilshad Khatun, she was Baghdad Khatun's brother Dimashq's daughter, who Absad had killed a few years earlier. He found a new object of his affection and started to when Dilshad Khatun became pregnant with his first child. You should ignore Baghdad Khatun in particular. Absad was unaware of his error as Baghdad Khatun's influence diminished. Absad was en route to the north in November of 1335 to repel a Golden Horde assault. Baghdad Khatun is thought to have initiated contact, according to Ibn Battuta, a man who enjoyed a good yarn following one last round of sex. Absad was cleaned off to Baghdad Khatun using a poisoned handkerchief, no matter how true something is, as this was by no means the only exaggerated tale of woman and sex that Battuta told. Absad had passed away at the age of 30, according to popular belief. This marked the end of the Ikhanate. Absad's demise marked the functional extinction of the Hulagu line. Ghazan, the uncle of Absad, the lineage had already puined, and alcoholism handled the majority of the remaining issue. And that is it for part 1 of the fall of the Mongol Empire. Make sure to like our channel, comment what you like best about the series, and make sure to subscribe to our channel right now so you don't miss out on the second part that is dropping anywhere soon. See you in the next one. And click the video you see on screen now to keep on watching the fall of the Mongol Empire.